I don't think boot camps are evil. I think that you can get good results out of them. I think, in fact, um, probably a relative majority of people get what they pay for if they're willing to enter it with the right mindset and put the time aside to actually study and work. So, um, yeah, just so my viewers know, I'm not all against it despite my experience. I'm actually for it in a lot of circumstances. So in any case, I'd like to hear how, just generally, how was it? I guess first off, did you have any programming experience going into it? Did you self-teach it all beforehand, or did you just dive in without preparing a ton?
Really didn't have any software background. I would say I'm just very comfortable with computers.
Mhm.
I think yeah. So yeah, I'm just very comfortable with computers, but I haven't formally uh done a Udemy course
Mhm.
or I know that there's free code camp. I haven't gone through any of them specifically.
Okay.
Maybe like one or two lessons, and then after that I was like, okay, like this seems fun. This seems cool.
Mhm.
And then I decided to just just take the dive after that.
Cool.
I did that was an avenue that I wanted to take self-studying, but I think unfortunately self-studying I think requires a very specific mentality and
Yeah.
also like I don't want to say like grit in a way. Like you just have to be very dedicated to like, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to achieve this by the end of the week. And I think that was very hard to stay with, I think, when you're self-studying.
Yeah.
But going back, I think I did want to try self-studying just because it's a much more affordable option. I've
Yeah.
heard that it was possible. And I was like, oh, my dad's into programming. I have a bunch of friends. I have so much support. But at the end of the day, it's like, do you yourself have the discipline to like sit down and accomplish these goals? And I think
Right.
that was, uh, I kept saying to myself, oh, I'm gonna, pick up JavaScript. I'm gonna learn, HTML, CSS. Uh, but weeks would go by where I would just be kind of like looking tutorial after tutorial, but without actually doing anything practically, like
Yeah.
actually coding.
Yeah.
And I think that was where I was like, okay, like let's not let words be words. Let's do something. And so
Yeah.
that's when I decided to take the jump.
Cool.
Yeah.
So just in general, like how was the experience? You did the
Mm.
3 month course, which I can't really speak to. I'd like to hear about the intensity of that. Did you fall behind during that time? Just in general, how was that experience?
Yeah. So I think the experience was, I feel like it was very mixed. I think it fortunately wasn't like the scenario where we had signed an NDA and say like, oh, we can't talk about it.
Sure.
It wasn't like our TAs and our lead was very very helpful.
Mhm.
And I think in the beginning they also set like a. I also feel a little bit mixed about this too, but they kind of set the expectation of like, okay, before you come to us, you should try your best with like, you know, using all your resources, Stack Overflow, Google, ChatGPT. And if you can't come to an answer there, then you can come to us.
Mhm.
Which I think it's good because that's essentially what a software engineer would have to do when you work on your own. Um, but at the same time, it felt like at the like I by the end of my boot camp, I feel like I didn't really utilize my TAs as well as I could have
Mm.
because I think they have experience that I could have really learned a lot from. But I think ChatGPT I think like has completely changed the field of like programming and even learning programming. So I think it for all the questions that I had about coding, I would just naturally just gravitate towards ChatGPT and just be like, oh, what's the use case for this? Give me example code for what this would look like and what's wrong with my code and how can we make it more efficient
Right.
and like stuff like that. I think it was overall good because the bootcamp was overall good because it forced me to kind of sit down. Okay, 9 to 5, this is what you're going to do. These are what it gave me like a schedule of what to do,
Mm.
what to accomplish by the end of the day. Now, is that something that I could have accomplished on my own? Looking back, I want to say yes, but also no, because that's not something I actually did when I did give myself that time.
Right.
So I feel like at the end of the day, you're really just paying for motivation,
Yeah.
which kind of sucks to say that. Um, I don't want to say that it wasn't worth it, because now coming out of the boot camp, I kind of have the sense of like, oh, I can do this on my own. I know
Hmm.
what I can, or I know what I have to do for me to, accomplish X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And like, hey, I don't get it now, but I will get it later. Type
Yeah.
type of mentality.
Yeah, I mean that's like that specifically is what Benji said in our last call together is like, one of the upsides of this whole thing falling apart and me not having to pay full price for the boot camp itself is that the inevitable just happened sooner. And the inevitable is that eventually you'll be mostly alone with figuring these things out, whether it's after boot camp and getting into that job, or if you're fortunate to get the position early once you're in the job itself. It's like most of the learning from about how to solve a specific problem is going to be on you. You can have some oversight. You will have some oversight and help from your managers in general, but it's not their job to teach you how to code. The help from them that you should expect should be not minimal, but also not fully comprehensive, um, as if you had a full-time mentor. So that is the inevitable eventuality of becoming a programmer. And so the question about whether you self-teach or go to boot camp and try to get a job after that, or if you get a job early on, eventually you come to that reality. So I don't think there's a right way to get to that eventuality, but it does happen to everybody at some point or another. So I do think that's the reality that everyone going to a coding boot camp eventually comes across. So yeah. Would you say that first off, I'm just curious, do you know what the initial cohort size was at GA, and then roughly how many of them graduated?
I would say I think it was around mid-20s about,
Okay.
but I think by the end of it we were down to 13 or so. It was actually a lot of our cohort actually dropped out.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. So almost a
yeah,
50% dropout rate.
yeah, yeah. Don't quote me on. I think it was quite a substantial dropout though.
Okay. Okay.
Um, and I think speaking with some of my cohort, I was able to make some friends. They're like pretty honest. They were like, yeah, I don't know if I'm really enjoying this experience by the end of it. And it's already like past the refund time, and
Yeah.
um like I feel like it was going pretty strong until I would say like 3/4 of it,
Okay.
till the end, where I just felt like, okay, a lot of this is a little overwhelming. This is I feel like this is where again I feel mixed as well. I
Hmm.
feel like it's the limitations of boot camps where uh I felt like I was just brute forcing my way of like, this is how you do things, and I wasn't learning.
Yeah. Right.
Where it was like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
It was just like, oh, this is the way things are done. And I think I think listening to someone else on YouTube where they were saying how learning computer science now, things are just so far abstracted that uh you don't really know why. Well, I don't think that this should be the case, but like doing a boot camp, you don't quite know why you're doing what you're doing. You just know that it works this way.
Right.
I'm not sure if you kind of experienced that during your time at GA, but I feel like what I wished for was if they actually taught us like why this is important or why this works. Because now I'm just kind of like, I feel like in order for you to grow as a software engineer, you kind of have to build off of uh, lower level things so that you
Yeah.
can be like, okay, this is there because this was inefficient, and then now we have a new framework. We have a new framework for that because it solves for this problem. Um, and I just felt like we just like went from we're just kind of building scaffolding off of nothing, off of thin air in a way.
Right. Right.
Right. So
Yeah,
I think
this
that
is
that
how,
was.
yeah, this is how it is. This is specifically how you do this thing, and it works, but
Mhm.
you don't necessarily know why. I would say I had a similar, I would say the circumstances were similar for me as well. I did the part-time cohort. So I mean the pace was half of what you were going through. Personally, I don't know if I even have the aptitude or ability to go through a 3-month cohort like you did. I might have been part of that 50% that ended up dropping given the pace of things. I yeah, I I basically agree with everything you just said. I think, you know, the cohort dissolved just after halfway through, basically for me. And I felt similar, I had spent a reasonable amount of time self-studying beforehand. I had learned the basics of HTML, JavaScript, and JS. But still, by the time we got to the back half, like learning the back end Node and Express and MongoDB, it did start to feel like, okay, this is starting to become a lot. I can definitely do this, but yeah, there might not be room to really truly understand that why while we're in this process, because just keeping up with the what is quite intensive. So moving on and going to the why of things is yeah, is maybe a bit much to ask in this particular situation. And I don't really know what the remedy for that is. I think something that is self-paced could probably be the case with like consistent mentorship. But yeah, I don't think there's a perfect answer in the market for that particular problem with coding boot camps.